So what if we read Jesus there saying, be mature, be wise, and be complete, just as God is complete? Kind of reframes it, and I think in a helpful way, away from this idea of perfection, of not having any flaws, but be complete just as God is complete. Now, how does Jesus illustrate this completeness? Because the very words wisdom and maturity, they imply a journey of growth. So how is Jesus illustrating this completeness in this passage? Well, he says in verse 45, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. See, God is providing the very stuff that makes life possible to both the good and the evil, the just and the unjust. Something we've talked about here a lot too is our breath, thinking of our breath that fills our lungs as an expression of God's love for us. It's a way for us to embody the love of God and actually let that love become a part of us. But the breath isn't reserved for just the good people, just the folks who decided to not go to brunch on a Sunday morning and be here. The breath is for the just and the unjust, the good and the evil. It's for all of us. So if we think of the rain and the sun and the breath that's in our lungs right now as an expression of God's love, if not love itself, then we can quickly come to see that the completeness of God is in the indiscriminate love that's shown to both the evil and the good. This is coming back now to Jesus' idea of enemy love. And we don't like this, do we? Even saying these words to you is uncomfortable because I myself, I'm clenching up. I don't like this. Does God not know what she did to me? Does God not know what he said about me? The violence that I've experienced in my life? These are good and appropriate prayers to pray. Bring them before God. Lament them before God. And know that God has not forgotten. God doesn't turn a blind eye to the things that we experience. Yet God in this place is calling us into loving that person who did that terrible thing to us. And it challenges us. Part of the problem, I think, is our dualistic minds, our Western minds. They're not doing us any favor here. Because we want to put people in these binary categories of good, not good, friend, foe. But people are much more complex than that, aren't they? They're much more complex than the binary categories of evil and good, just and unjust. I believe it's the space between those categories. That's where we too can witness and even enter into divine love that's happening right there for that person. If we just focus on the good or the bad that they did, it'll be impossible for us to see them as a whole image of God and love them for who they are. Now, I'm convinced that God doesn't see in binaries like that. I'm convinced that God sees the whole person. God sees the whole of cosmos all at once. God doesn't see humanity as friend or foe. Yes, there's powers and principalities that we work against for justice, but God doesn't see you as a friend or foe. God loves you for all that you are and is calling you into more fullness of life. Even the faintest glimmer of divinity that's peeking through all the stuff, all the sin that we put on, it's not so faint that God can't see it and God can't love you. God catches that glimmer and loves that. For us to break out of our dualistic thinking, we must gain this contemplative mind where we hold two or more things at once and we start to see things as a whole thing, as a whole person. It's the contemplative gaze that can hold the uncomfortable space long enough to catch that glimmer, to catch a glimpse of the image of God in the other person, and love that person for all that they are.